Hello and welcome to Church Chasers. I'm your host, Allison Bear, and today we're going to be looking at churches in historic Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston was founded by the British in the year 1670 and is the oldest city in South Carolina. It is known for its rich history, well-preserved architecture, distinguished restaurants, and mannerly people, a beautiful place for anyone to settle down. One thing for which Charleston is particularly known is all of its beautiful and varying churches. Today we have Christy, a recent graduate of Liberty University's Graduate History program, who has taken a new job in one of Charleston's many museums. She is looking for a church that not only lines up with her Protestant beliefs, but is also an historic site. Welcome, Christy.
Hi, Allie. It's great to be here.
How can we help you find what you're looking for?
Well, I'm looking for a church that carries historical significance. I would prefer it to have beautiful columns on the outside and decorative pillars inside. Boxed pews are ideal as I like the privacy during worship. I also like it when the cemetery is adjacent to the church building as I enjoy being closely connected to the church's past. Theologically, I must have a Protestant church, but I don't care what denomination as long as it has the liturgy and traditional hymns.
Great, let's get started. The First Baptist Church of Charleston is the oldest Baptist church in the South. Originally, the congregation was started in 1682 in Kittery, Maine, and migrated to Charleston in 1696. They worshipped in homes until the first church building was built in 1699. The church has split, and there have been floods, cyclones, fires, earthquakes, and wars, damaging and destroying various aspects of the church. However, it is still a historic building as the church remains the way it was in the late 1800s. Although this is not the original building, it still has the large columns on the outside that you preferred and is a prominent church in the Protestant community. It has a cemetery on site surrounding the building with headstones dating back to before the Revolutionary War.
While this church has everything that I told you I wanted, the cemetery does not feature any prominent historical figures and is rather small. Also, while the church is beautiful, the outside columns are exactly what I'm looking for. Architecturally, the interior is a little plain. The box pews are lovely. I would prefer an altar, though, that is a bit more visually appealing, with maybe some metallic accents or a stained glass window. I'll keep this one in mind, but I want to keep looking.
Okay then, on to the next church. It's just down the street.
Okay, let's go.
Here is a member of the French Huguenot congregation whose family has been coming to this church since it was built. Let's listen to a description of the church from the perspective of a parishioner.
Calvinistic, not Presbyterian. Huguenot is not a denomination. Each church is individually run. We are the only active Huguenot church in the Western Hemisphere. We use the King James Version of the Bible. It's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for us. Our liturgy is the one that John Calvin did back in the 1560s. It's basically anyone that you can find in any Protestant church, close to the Methodist liturgy, the Baptist affirmation of faith, the Apostles' Creed. So basically we can be classed as simply a New Testament, New Covenant church. The simplicity, the beauty. There's nothing to take away from the fact that you have come in here to worship Almighty God through His Son, Jesus Christ. The only icon is a small cross on the communion table. We don't do the candles or any stained glass windows or anything pertaining to that. In 1680, the HMS Richmond docked at Charlestown, and aboard were 45 Huguenot refugees. They had been given land grants by King Charles to settle around Charlestown, which was an English settlement, to protect his Englishmen here from the Spaniards, from the pirates, from the Indians, but the Indians here were more than friendly, so that was no problem. So more of them started coming in. They organized the church in 1681, built the first building in 1685 on this very same lot. This is the third building on this lot. This was built in 1845. The style at the time, the architect is Gothic Revival. Again, the simplicity and the beauty of it. The Henry Urban organ is a tracker organ. and we get to hear it once a month. But we have such a large choir, they have to sit in the balcony. Our choir is the musical students from the College of Charleston. So needless to say, it's wonderful. This was built in 1845. The style were pews. Most churches that were built in that era had the individual family pews. If I'm not mistaken, St. Michael still has it, but all of the other churches got rid of them. So they say family pews. They say they were purchased. My great-grandfather purchased this pew when the church was built in 1845. Wow. So I've had the honor and the blessing to be able to sit through 3 generations, 4 generations. So basically, between the war of northern aggression, the church was in such bad shape. Our land had been taken away from us. Our man had been killed, and the church was in very bad shape. So some of the northern Huguenots said we'll not let the church be completely destroyed. But large plaques on the wall are in memoriam gifts given by the descendants of the original 45 who came in Charlestown. The smaller plaques are basically, you had a Huguenot ancestor, you wanted to make a donation to the church, you made a donation and we placed a plaque on the wall for you. Few have been a member of the church. There's one from my father who was a member of the church, but basically they didn't even come to Charlestown. They didn't come to South Carolina. They just simply knew. George and Martha Washington had Huguenot ancestors. The DuPonts and the Laniers from Georgia. So they're everywhere. So basically, and naturally, Francis Marion. Not Mel. We are alive and well. We have over 400 members. We average a good 150 a Sunday. We're coming back. We do now have a Sunday school. We have nursery. And most of the members, the newest members, which are the young ones, are coming to us from the Catholic and Episcopal Church. They're coming back to the basics, to what the true church is.
Wow, that's impressive. I had no idea there was only one Huguenot church in the Western Hemisphere. That baptismal font is adorable. It is so interesting the way some of the box pews are still owned by the same families. The altar is lovely, but still too simple for my taste. I was hoping for something a bit more grand. Interior pillars were on my wish list, but there are none of them present in this church's architecture. Also, I'm starting to realize I would really appreciate the ambiance created by stained glass windows. The grander the better. Also, I like the liturgy, but I'm unfamiliar with the hymns. I would prefer a church that is part of a larger church community in the city. I'm new to town and would like a church to provide me with as many new connections as possible. This cemetery is much better than the last one as it features several Pinckneys. However, something's still missing.
It seems like we're finding out what you really want in a church. The next church is much more grand and is a prominent feature in the Charleston skyline. It also includes a very large cemetery with many famous parishioners buried within its walls. It's a very short walk away.
Let's go check it out.
Immediately upon entering St. Philip's, you can see that this church is on a much grander scale. There are large exterior columns leading to a spacious entryway. The sanctuary features box pews surrounded by decorative pillars, between which are ornate archways with decorative angels, referencing the spiritual connection between heaven and earth. The altar features a large and colorful stained glass window surrounded by more ornate decor. The cemetery is quite large and features several famous South Carolinians, including John C. Calhoun, Edward Rutledge, the youngest signer of the Declaration of Independence, Charles Pinckney, and Christopher Gadsden, who was a delegate from South Carolina to the First Continental Congress and invented the Don't Tread on Me flag. This church also features a clock in the steeple, which was significant for colonial parishioners because it was symbolic of how the church regulated their lives every day. Here is a modern-day parishioner now. Let's hear what she has to say.
I appreciate you all coming today, and I'm so glad we have a beautiful day for it. This was the first Anglican congregation in South Virginia, but the first St. Philip's building was a little frame one in 1681, where St. Michael's is now. This site, in the early 1720s, was a royal colony, so Church of England people, which the Anglicans were assigned to a church according to where they lived on the peninsula. So that may be one reason we have one of the signers of the Declaration, Edward Rutledge, buried in our churchyard, and his brother, John, who was the governor and the designer of the Constitution, buried in St. Michael's. Doesn't necessarily mean there was a family feud. They just did what they were told. Then the revolution came, and they stopped doing what they were told. So after the revolution, George Washington worshipped it at the second St. Philip's and at St. Michael's. And also John Wesley preached at that second St. Philip's church. It was before he had his warming of the heart experience back in England, but it's very interesting to know that he did. Then in February of 1835, as that painting depicts, there was a terrible fire that engulfed this whole neighborhood. This time there was no way to stop the fire. By 1838, it was opened again for worship. And this site, when it was first used, was just half a block south of the northern border and wall of the city. After 1835, the congregation continued to prosper, went through lots of restorations after that building. A shell exploded during War II in the States, and the congregation had to flee. There was a terrible earthquake that I'm sure you've heard about in 1886. Practically every building in Charleston was severely. Many more fires, some earthquakes. And then about 1886 and there were more troubling overhead and lots of hurricanes. And the most recent severe one for us was Hurricane Peter. And holes in the ceiling, holes in the roof, holes in the floor. But we had no electrical power, but we were thankful to have other power. You couldn't tell it from the sidewalk, but the steeple had been rotated 12 degrees. So when the architects and engineers got up there, they could see what had happened. We also found the workings of an old clock that they restored, and the bells were replaced. It took about 5 years, and to gradually get it back. They always restore and always rebuild. It's a very biblically centered church. We have outstanding clergy who believe in preaching the gospel. We don't hear social and political sermons except the aspects of those that are in the Gospels and through the Bible. And we have a wonderful choir program that starts at 3 years old. We also support missions abroad and here. We have a long-term missionary who's in Charleston who has over 25 years. Founded an orphanage and a school and adopted a number of children herself. And I'm saying all this because I want you to know it's the interior plan of both St. Philip's and St. Michael's, the one on board and meeting, are both suggestive of St. Martin's in the Fields in London. And so if you've been there, or when you go there, you might be in Trafalgar Square and look northeast and think, I've seen that building before. And that's because this is suggestive of that. He wanted to combine functionality with beauty and reacted a bit against some of the quote-unquote modern architecture that was strictly functional and didn't seem to give much thought to the aesthetic aspect, and he felt that it should be combined. So that's what he was trying to do. Some people said this has been called English Baroque, combination of a number of different styles. And when the Charleston architect Albert Stewart designed that with his partner, Mr. Samuel Lapham, in the early 1900s, he had traveled on the continent a lot, so you certainly see suggestions of Greek and Roman.
Is this Georgian architecture?
A lot of buildings in Charleston are the earliest ones, Georgian and then federal, but this would be later and much more elaborate. You know, the early Anglican churches, and that's true of the Presbyterian churches and Methodist churches too, did not have stained glass windows because they were emphasizing the Protestant aspect of Anglicanism. Later on, and after the mid-1800s, Anglican churches and the Methodist churches and Presbyterian churches began adding stained glass. But it was an emphasis early on the Protestant aspect. So this window was added later. You see the rest of the windows are plain.
I really like the balcony. That is certainly a must-have in whichever church I choose. I would prefer my baptismal font next to the entry of the church because I appreciate the symbolism as baptism signifies the beginning of the Christian life. It is unfortunate that this church's font is under the pulpit. I am really loving those stained glass windows. I only wish there were more of them. You definitely did a good job finding an ornate church, but this one is so ornate that it would be a bit distracting during the service. The columns are especially distracting with their intricate Corinthian tops. I really like the liturgy and hymns, so maybe we can find something less ornate but in the same denomination?
I think I know just the church you're looking for. Also located in Charleston is St. Philip's sister church, St. Michael's. Want to go take a look?
That sounds great.
St. Michael's was founded in 1751 when the Anglican congregation had outgrown St. Philip's Parish. The interior of St. Michael's features 3 gorgeous and detailed stained glass windows, adding a beautiful ambiance to the sanctuary. It has the box pews that you liked, and one of them was used by George Washington during his visit to Charleston in 1791. One of the seats was removed to accommodate his tall stature. The balconies that you liked in St. Philip's are also here in St. Michael's. However, the tops of the columns that you found so distracting in the last church are decorated in the plainer Doric style. One thing you might be especially excited about is the baptismal font toward the entrance of the sanctuary. Not only is it in the location you desired, but it is also the most ornate out of any baptistry we have seen. It features a golden dove symbolizing the descending of the Holy Spirit at Jesus' baptism and its indwelling in each believer at conversion. This dove is also a counterweight for the lid covering the font. The font incorporates many aspects of symbolism that you stated were important to your decision-making process. Their cemetery is also large and features another Charles Pinckney, who was a wealthy supporter of the Revolution and a signer of the Constitution, and John Rutledge, who was another signer of the Constitution and an early governor of South Carolina.
Wow, this church seems to have everything I'm looking for. I love the 3 stained glass windows. They are so beautiful. The symbolism of the baptismal font is exactly what I want in a baptistry. I think this is the most historical church we have been to simply because of George Washington's pew. While the cemetery does not house as many famous names as the other Episcopal church, it has plenty for my taste. It is nice to know that I can be so near figures who were so important to America's history. The liturgy and hymns are also exactly what I'm looking for. This church is beautiful without being distracting, so it will be easier to focus on God while worshiping.
Sounds like you really like this church.
I think this is the one for me. I can't wait to give it a try on Sunday. Views expressed in this documentary are not representative of the makers of this film. We are well aware that the appearance of the church building should not be the most important factor in choosing a church.
Thanks for watching!